As I said at the top of the show, I've done interviews for probably 5 years. None of them have me as excited or jazzed as this one. I don't care if it's the prime minister I'm speaking to. I don't care if it was the president. I don't care if it's the premier. I don't care if it's a billionaire. Siddhartha Khosla is the composer, and we're going to get into how much he is to This Is Us, and he's finally here with us on the Ari Goldkind Show. I'm going to call you Sid if it's okay. I know that's the emails going back. It's really amazing to have you on.
Thank you, Ari, and you can call me Sid. I'm very flattered that you put me in this in that group that you just kind of put me. Thank you.
I do, because I have a very lucky life in Canada. We're on Sirius XM Canada Talks channel 167, and I have a very lucky TV life. And my TV life stops every Tuesday at 9 o'clock for This Is Us, and I'm so sad that it's over. So, as much as I'm going to geek out and fanboy over you, I'm looking at the room where I see you in YouTube videos, scoring and putting YouTube videos out. I've decided to take up the acoustic guitar because I want to learn some of the pieces you've done. I play bass and piano growing up, but now, the sounds you'll bring. So let's start with just getting into it. How did you get into this incredible project, which I love so dearly? I know that you grew up with Dan Fogelman, who created the show. How did this all come to be?
Well, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I look back on, you get these opportunities on these projects and shows or whatever little opportunities you have in your career, and you never know where they're going to take you, and you just kind of, you do them and you see what happens, really. But I began my career as a singer-songwriter in a band called Gold Spot, and I spent sort of the first half of, I think, my career to date in my band, trying to break out as a band. I had gotten signed as an artist to Mercury UK and put out a couple albums. And they sort of received very, very limited success, and that's maybe generous. But they had, I toured and played with bands that I looked up to, and got to play the Glastonbury Festival in the UK, and just did stuff that was just like bucket list stuff for me, and very, very excited about it. And sort of as that part of my career was sort of waning, you could say, Dan Fogelman called me. And Dan was this established screenwriter. He had written movies such as Cars and Crazy Stupid Love, and
Great movies.
Great movies. A very prolific film screenwriter, television writer. And Dan and I were roommates freshman year of college, hallmates actually. And then we lived together with a bunch of other friends my sophomore year of college. We went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And we had always been friends, but we never worked together. We always sort of kept our paths separate. He would come to all my Gold Spot shows and be one of the few people that would support the early days of the show. I remember when there'd be like 5 people in the audience, he'd be one of them. And Dan called me and he said, "Hey, I have this TV show." It was a show called The Neighbors for ABC. And he said, he's like, we're looking for a composer for second season. Will you come on and score the show? And my immediate reaction was, no, I'm making albums. I don't want to score TV music. I think I was sort of snobby about it. And I was like, TV music, at that time, I was like, do I really want to? Nah, I'm good. And he's like, and I had actually recommended somebody else for the gig. And he was just like, no, I want you to do it. And I said, hey, I've never really scored. Maybe part of it was also fear. I'd never scored for television or film at that point. I'd been making music and albums and making sort of my own, getting my own sort of voice out there and whatever it was I was doing. And he said, no, I believe you have the ability to, I remember this conversation. I believe you have the ability to emotionally connect with audiences. I've seen it with your music. I've seen it at your shows. I've seen you perform. I see it. And so after speaking to my manager and my wife, everybody sort of said, hey, you should take it, do it, see where it takes you. And it was the best decision I ever made. even though that show got canceled 6 months after I started working on it.
That's Hollywood.
That's Hollywood. And then I said, well, is this for me? I'm not sure. But eventually I did other projects for Dan and for other people. And then Dan came back 2016 and said, hey, I've got this show. It's called The 36, which was the original name for This Is Us. And it was about these triplets who had just turned 36. And
I was just gonna say to you, I know the show inside out, every scene of it. I know every theme. I know All Night Long that you did I know the Forever Now. I know Hope. I know Jack's theme. I know Randall's. And I was like, what's the 36? Even and now you just explained it. I feel, because I was stumped for a moment.
Yeah, because there were multiple project names. It was at one point, it was the Untitled Dan Fogelman Project. Then it was the 36, or it was 36, something like that. And he sent me the script, and he said, we've already filmed the first episode. We're trying to find a sound for the show. Do you think you can sort of write something off of the script? And it was Dan's nice way of saying that I had to audition for the project. It was a big show for him. And he said to me, so this is going to be, and he knew back then, he said, this is going to be a big show for me, for him personally. And little did I know how big at that time. And I read that pilot script, and if you remember, the pilot script ends on that crazy reveal that
Gerald McRaney of mine. I'm trying to.
Gerald McRaney.
Right.
The big reveal at the end is all this entire time you think Jack and Rebecca. You basically see the story of Jack and Rebecca, and then you see the story of Randall, and then you see the story of Kevin and Kate, and you don't realize that they're all connected in the way they are. And at the end of that is when the floor drops from under you, and you realize that Jack and Rebecca are their parents. And it happens when Jack is looking through the glass of the nursery, and he sees his twins, and doesn't see the triplet that they lost. And then another triplet, a third, gets inserted, and that's little Randall. Right.
A much smaller Sterling K. Brown.
Much smaller Sterling K. Brown. And I wrote this piece of music. It was a 6.5 piece of music, 6.5 minute piece of music. And I flew to LA because I had a meeting anyway. And then I spent like 2 nights in the studio just recording it at a friend's place. Gave it to Dan. He fell in love with it. Glenn and John, who directed the pilot, fell in love with it. And I got the job. And so that got me into the show. And it was a very acoustic driven piece of music. It ended up being the Weight Watchers theme in season 1. If you go to that first episode, it's the music that plays when Kate meets Toby in the Weight.
It's a big scene.
Yeah. And that was a piece of music I'd written. And in my mind, it was not to be used over anything comedic or anything. It was going to be it's a dramatic piece of music. I was like, oh, this could be the theme of the show. And it was neither of those two. And that sort of was a big moment, because Glenn and John and Dan had put this seemingly melancholic, dramatic piece of music over a lighthearted scene. And that all of a sudden started setting a real tone to the show, where we were not going to score the comedy. Comedy was going to live dry, we call it. It's going to breathe as is, or I'm going to play to the subtext of why those people are actually there.
So is that a way of saying, because to me, one of the things about it is it's quite simplistic's not the right word, maybe nuanced, it's maybe subtle, it doesn't hit you over the head, it's not like a certain key in Batman, it doesn't feel like Hans Zimmer for somebody I listen to and he's a name brand in your world. Like there's something beautiful is too easy a word to say, you probably have a better adjective or synonym for me, but you're not pounding the listener over the head, but there's a melody underneath it that continues, and you don't even realize how beautiful you're being moved, because it's not manipulative. I don't know if anything I'm saying makes sense, but is it something that you're thinking about as it goes, or is this what's in your mind and you have this insanely genius ability to actually make music versus me, who's going to take a lesson or picks up a bass and plays along to Smoke on the Water, and that's as far as I'm going to go?
Well, you're very flattering. I thank you. I think my job on the show, I felt like I was tasked with a couple important things. Dan always has sort of trusted in my melodic ability, and it was like, he's like, how to write a hook. It's always the thing. Like it's been my thing that in my band, in my scores, the one thing that I feel like is my best strength is writing a melody that sort of gets sort of stuck in your head a little bit. It's just a good melody. I'm a stickler for making sure that the other task that he asked me to sort of like, he didn't really ask, but I could tell. He said, I remember him using words like, I trust you to not be too heavy-handed, because the show has, and it's not, it has always been this, but it was way more, it had this in the first couple seasons. It used to be way more monologue driven, and there were these sort of sweeping monologues. We still had them, but not to the same degree. And I think the key was making sure that we didn't put a hat on a hat. And, just because somebody was saying something that was inspired didn't mean that I needed to your point, to bring in this sort of big sweeping epic thing every single time. Otherwise it would feel like a hat on a hat.
Funny how you're explaining it in such a more elegant way than I tried to say how I watch it as just a guy watching TV. It doesn't feel like you're getting beaten over the head, but hat on a hat.
Right. Subtle. And it's like, and then it's like, and it is subtle. It's very nuanced. And frankly, I always wanted the score to feel like it was earned by the actors. And oftentimes when you see shows, and same reason why I can't stand a lot of stuff that I watch, and same with you probably, is that you're like, oh, here we go. And you just know where you're headed before you're even there. And so I think with this show, I sort of made a conscious effort to really pull back a lot. And I remember, there were battles between me and Dan through series where Dan was like, I think you got to go more. I need more. And the notes sometimes would come back. Anytime you had any notes or comments, as we call it, notes is what we call them, but it was always go bigger.
Is this from executives or is this from him who knows the vision?
It was, it used to be from executives a little bit in the beginning, but then we always were like, nah, listening to that. We know what we're doing, and so, but Dan sometimes himself wanted stuff occasionally he'd come to me and say, we got to go bigger. And I would be, and so we would battle a little bit, and I'd be like, I think we got to go smaller, so, but we always found the balance. But the key also was melody, right? So if I had a melodic hook or melody that I had established in an episode, so as you notice, almost every episode has a thematic device.
For sure.
I put that thing in 15, 20 times in an episode. You hear it like an earworm over and over again.
So I wanted to, because to me, I was going to see if this point made any sense to you, to show you how little I know about this, but I'm hoping that this will make sense to you. So you talk about the melody underlying something, or an earworm, which we all know that word, but to me, melody means something that you tap your finger or something, you hear something underneath, and it makes you start to feel something. I'm going to give you an example, and you're going to say this is either stupid or you're going to know what I'm talking about. La La Land to me is one of the most beautiful scores that affected me. And it's Justin Hurwitz. I can't remember. It's a second person. You'd probably know. But there's the melody of City of Stars. And it's a very subtle piano. Like even I learned it like the day after I saw the movie 6 times. And even though it's not played heavily throughout the movie, when there's a little undercurrent of it, you're like, it hits you. It's emotional, but you don't feel like it's cheap.
Right.
And that's how I feel every time I heard the finger picking or the guitar or something. And there's a whoosh. I can't even describe. I don't know what it is. There's this really interesting sounds you're making. I want to get into, because I know your background is different, and that's really interesting to me. But there'd be these sounds, but it didn't take you away from anything. It brought you in. It made you more emotional. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the second last episode, which, I'm a guy, I haven't had a tear in my eye in 48 years on this planet. But that's not just because William, for those who have watched the show, is taking Rebecca through the train car. It's because there's things you're doing that are unbelievable. So the earworm and the melody, is this something, I guess I will form this like Alex Trebek in the form of a question, but is this, because I obviously you can tell how much I love this. Is
Yeah.
this something that you're born with? Is this something that you hear as you're watching dailies or reading scripts? Like, why you versus the 100 other people that could never do what you've done here or would have done it in a way that did nothing for the show? Like, what's going on in your talent that allow, or do you never even question it because that's a bad idea to start with?
To be honest, I don't think about it. I've never thought about that, about like, why is it that I'm able to do it?
Well, then I withdraw the question.
No, it's a question worth thinking about. I think it's worth thinking about, without making it, without me getting too egotistical about what I do. But like, I think it's, I know what it is on this show particularly. There's something very, and I'm not, I don't know if you're aware of, so Dan and I have known each other since freshman year of college. So I've known him longer than I haven't at this point in my life.
Longer than your wife, which is even a funny way to think about it.
Longer than my wife. And so I have seen him go through the loss of his mother at a young age. I've seen his star shine and shoot up very brightly in his career.
The loss of his mother must factor into Jack and the loss of a parent in the show, obviously. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one to just hear you say that and go, that must have something to do with it.
Of course, and what's amazing to me is that, this ended up being a story about a mother. You kind of, which is another Fogelman sort of like pulling a rabbit out of a hat thing, but doing very subtly, like the score impacting you that you realize. And it's the same thing. It's just like this slow thing. First 2 seasons, it's about Jack. It's about the,
and the fire,
the patriarch of the family, and then this struggle with living life without the patriarch. But what it ends up being really is a story about a mother, and so I've always said this, is that I write the music of the show for my friend to help him process his grief as much as I do the actors on the screen and what's happening. And so I have a very meta sort of experience with the show that is special and unique. And so for that reason, nobody else can score this show. There are a lot of talented composers that can do it and do their own version of it and would have done a great job. I don't doubt that. But in terms of my connection to Dan and helping him, when we started, there's no way you could have told me in that pilot episode that I would be helping my friend process his grief for the next 6 years. No way. It's all retrospectively, I feel that way.
That's so interesting because where I am in Canada, just down the way from me, there's a guy who is a sound engineer for big shows in LA. He does it from here. I won't say his name. He's very successful, does big shows, but they are gigs to him. And he views them as gigs. They're big. They're shows you would know. I mean, you may watch some of them, but they're gigs. I don't get the sense that this is us. I mean, I don't get the sense. I mean, yes, there's a paycheck. Yes, it's done well. Yes, life isn't free. Yes, Los Angeles has become more expensive, and I know the price of a gallon of gas there. But this doesn't strike me as a gig for you. Am I misreading that?
No, this is like, this is the exact opposite of a gig. I was actually having a conversation with a friend of mine right before, like maybe a couple of hours ago. And I was saying that I'm missing that feeling of just waking up every morning and working on this show, and it's because it never felt like a gig to me. This was like this show for me has always been an extension of me, of my soul, a way for me and my friend and I to bond and connect in a way that we never thought we would ever connect. And so for me, it's been a labor of love. It's just been a passion project for me. I feel like I'm in a band that started in like high school and continued, and the band stayed together and got really successful. That's what it feels like, so it doesn't feel like a job ever. It feels like Dan and I have been in like a band together since.
How has this changed life for you then, given what you do for a living? I emphasize for a living. How has this, I would assume massively, but I don't know your business. I would assume like there, when I said Hans Zimmer, I said Justin Hurwitz. I mean, obviously I know I'm not going to get into buttering that, but John Williams. I mean, these are people who are identified with a sound. This Is Us has a sound. It doesn't sound like anybody else could have done it. Like, I know you're not going to say, of course, nobody else could have done it. Danny Elfman wouldn't have done what you did. But that's how it seems to me. Your background, your parents working hard to come here. I mean, I've read a little bit about it. Like, this is all kind of like a dream. I mean, the American dream is a cliche, but your parents, and look, I'm not going to get into politics with my day job here, but your politics worked their asses off, pun intended. I mean, are they still, let me ask you this, are they still alive?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you this, which I have no idea, but do they watch the show?
Yes.
Do they have those holy 4-letter word moments where they're like, this is our boy, and this show doesn't work without our boy? I mean, I just can't even, I don't have kids, I have dogs, but I can't imagine as a parent, the calls from your parents, assuming I'm picturing stereotypical, whatever you could picture, my big fat Greek wedding, of which you are not Greek, but like every Tuesday at 10 when it's done, I sit and I'm like, I got to talk about this with somebody. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You have parents. What's it like when they call you up on the phone and go, our son is Superman?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, to go back a little bit, you said you hit on a lot of things there. My parents came to the US in the late 70s from India, immigrants with $8 to their name, and started a life here. And then their son, they had to send me back to India to be raised by my grandparents. So I was exposed to Indian music as a kid. I lived with my grandparents until my parents were able to sort of bring me back. They came with nothing, so they were trying to establish a life. It was hard to have someone take care of me while they were working in school full time, blah, blah, blah. So they lived that quintessential American immigrant experience, with the added piece that I was sent back to India to be raised by my grandparents. When this show started feeling like, when I started unlocking this show was episode 113, season 1, where Kate is in a weight loss class, and she's pounding the sticks on the mat, and she has a flashback to Jack's funeral, her dad's funeral. I received that picture, and it was just silent footage for a minute and a half. And all of a sudden I realized at that moment, wait a minute, this show's about something else. The show's about this interconnectivity of life. It's this idea of seemingly small choices that are made having large impacts that sort of ripple on and never stop having an impact. Butterfly effect sort of types of stuff.
Yep, small moments.
There's sci-fi in this show. It's like, wait, this. And so I started bringing in the music from my childhood a little bit in my thinking. It was like the sounds of it. Like there's a very sort of like, there's an Indian sound to some of the score. It's subtly in there. It's like, if you're Indian, you kind of pick up on it. If you're not, you might. And if you don't, you're like, this is interesting and different. So there's this bond I have with my family, with my parents, that's also sort of presented into this music. And so they've also connected, I think, without saying it. We've never had the conversation to say, oh, it sounds like a little bit of the Desi music we grew up on or whatever. Nothing like that. But it's like they do feel the impact. And I will read to you. Let me find it here. Let me find the text.
Well, here's what I'd like to do, Sid.
Yeah.
We have to take a quick break. We're going to be back in 2 minutes on the Ari Goldkind Show. We're going to let you find that, and we'll pick up from that, because I'd like to hear from that and talk more about the small moments, which is some of the beautiful emotion and resonance, I think, of your music and the show. We'll be right back in 2 minutes on the Ari Goldkind Show with Sid Khosla, the composer of the amazing show This Is Us, which I've talked about enough on the show, and we'll be back in 2 minutes. We're back with Siddhartha Khosla, the composer of This Is Us, who is finding something from his parents, which I think has real resonance. And I want to invite you now to share it with us.
Well, I'm gonna have to get in my text messages here. Let me pull up a text message from my dad. So you asked how they respond.
Yes.
I mean, my dad is pretty famous for his text message analyses that follow each episode. I mean, I think it's kind of the only thing he texts me about.
I can only imagine how funny this is going to be. I've seen other stars with their parents sending them something sweet. I'm waiting with bated breath.
You know, January 25th, love the music. The opening music sounds different. Is it? Yes. He writes more depth, a lot more. Yes. And he says, I love you, Beta, which means Beta means son.
Yes.
This is every time I think any sort of these messages of I love you always seem to revolve around the show. Love you, Beta. This episode is haunting. The writing with the actual, like, I don't know how you get it. There's an emoji of someone writing.
Yeah.
More casual and matter of fact than ever before. I have no words to experience my joy, or to words to express my joy.
So, you know, that to me brings me to something that I think ties into, I was asking you a question earlier, unless you want to read it, I'll wait more, I'll wait. But that to me is where I thought this was going to go.
Yeah, no, you're correct. It has gone in that. I can read you the final thing.
Sure, please.
From the finale, he says, this episode, starting with a note. Mom was magic. Nice opening. Wow, what an ending. Shaving scene with the boys. Birds chirp on. Feels so pointless. ... Easy, pure love images. Smells of pies and pipes. Distinctive smells. It's a boy. What a dance by Randall. She grabbed my hand swimming. You don't walk away from what is so obviously in front of you. I love you. Amazing music. I can hear you. Love, Papa. That's the last thing he writes.
So let's talk about that for a second. Let's let you put that and come back, because
yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second, because this is interesting to me, not as only as somebody who loves the show, but has very strong political views about the direction of our world. Isn't this really your dad experiencing the American dream through his son, which is they've come here to make a better life? You've made people's lives better. And I'm not saying this to be now the fanboy. Like, this to me is interesting from a political aspect. We're not going to go to politics, don't worry. But
yeah, we can.
What?
We can. Go ahead.
No, but I'd love to talk to you again in the future about this, but I want to, the way that this is hitting me about what you just had to your father is the joy and pride he's getting from a son who's gone out in the world and made the world better. You know, you're literally, and like, I'm not the first person to say it. Like, anybody can Google this. People really respond very strongly to this show by the millions. This is also a show that didn't die off in viewership. Right. From the beginning, as you know. I mean, look, I followed Hollywood all my life. My family was in the business in LA years ago. I'm not going to get into it, but you know, these shows tend to, with cable and Netflix and streaming and cord cutting. This is to see your father say that is sort of like the epitome of hard work, sacrifice. It will lead somewhere bigger. It will lead somewhere better. I know how he feels sending you those texts. Let me ask you this question. How do you feel receiving those from your dad?
I feel proud that he's proud. I do feel what you're saying, and I think I feel that pride. His pride, as you're saying, is a very astute observation, but that on your part, his pride really is in seeing his son, fulfill his dreams, right. And by his son fulfilling his dreams, he has fulfilled his dream as a father coming to this country with nothing.
And making it better.
Yes.
Which I think, as I said, not to get into the politics, that's becoming not as common as we think. And that's why there's something beautiful to that. And let's go back to This Is Us, the actual show, for a minute, because you had mentioned before the break something that I mean, look, people didn't like the Seinfeld finale. I did because I thought it befitted the snarky tone of it, the tongue in cheek of it. You know, we're not on Frontline or 60 Minutes here. Like, this isn't about coal factories in West Virginia. This is supposed to be entertainment. When I saw people, and not a lot of people did it, I think the general consensus is that the finale, not the penultimate on the train, which I could do a whole show with you about your music in that episode. I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that because you're going to be like, I don't need to hear more praise about it. But the finale was really, to me, what the show was about. And the only people who didn't get that are mouth breathers. I mean, I have to speak like my normal self, which is, it's not all fireworks in life. It's not the wedding day. It's not the wedding night when you consummate the marriage. It's the look between Randall and his dad on a couch in a moment that you and I would never think would make good TV.
Right.
But that's the Sopranos moment when it fades to black.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, do you see what's happening there? Does it need to be like, is this like, you're not the writer? I know who the writer, I follow who directs it every week, Ken Olin. I can go way into the weeds here with you.
Well,
But is this something that is coming out of you because it's there? Is it something you're struggling with? The tone, the composition? Like, I'm so fascinated by this because I watched that and I'm like, how genius to end the show on exactly what the show is about, which it's not about the loudest fight. It's not about screaming, I hate you or I love you. It's about a subtle look that says, you're there. And your music in the back has that heft without it being the Imperial March. That's the only famous piece of music I can think of. I know Obi-Wan Kenobi is streaming now, whatever. What goes through you as you're trying to contribute this?
well, that episode, in my mind, might have been one of our best for the same reasons that you have articulated. I remember texting Dan. We were trying to figure out what the tone of this final episode was going to be, because you're right. The penultimate episode could have effectively been the end of series. It was the most explosive. We got. It was. It had all the bells and whistles of all the drama.
And when it was done, I looked to my right and I said to my friend, I said, how are they not ending it on this? I don't know what the hell they're going to do next week, but I digress.
And Dan, when I saw the sort of early cut of that final episode, now mind you, a third of that episode was shot 3 years prior, over the last years, which is another stroke of genius by Fogelman.
So the kids wouldn't age.
Right, because he knew, right, because we have those 3 or 4 sort of eras of the kids that we've seen them in, and you can't ever go back and get that first era back without having filmed it, because now those kids, if you look at them, they look older than they look as old as
it wouldn't work.
High school. They're looking like that now,
Yep.
So I remember texting him, and I can actually, this is actually a very good exchange, because this is a kind of thing that you might want to see for sort of your own. I mean, I wish there was a way to actually share it, but
you could share a screen. I don't know how to enable it.
I don't know how I can share the screen.
But this is, like, to me, my version of behind the music, but in a way that's much more resonant to me.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now here. Let's go. This is sorry, give me a second. I'm going to find this because it's really, really good.
Yeah, please.
First conversation between me and Dan on May 4th, 2022, after I started seeing the early footage. I can imagine a lot of 18, meaning 618, I'll read you even my poor grammar in these texts.
What's 618? I won't pretend to know.
I can imagine a lot of 18, meaning episode 618, we call it, on like nothing but a pad with texture until maybe the end. It seems like, per the script, we're playing into this idea of stillness, quiet. Could be a cool device to not play our hand too emotionally until the end of episode. Fogelman writes back, I totally agree. And then I said, we might consider the Kevin Painting theme called Us for Act 6 meaning the final act,
Mhm.
if you don't go song, meaning if you don't use a song to end series, maybe we look at the Kevin Painting theme from 105. I haven't used it since, I believe. He writes back, he says, love. And that was the conversation on May 4th. So it was this idea that like, and in our conversations, I had just told him how quietly confident that episode was. And he was nervous about, are we,
Yes, yes, you're perfect.
if we're too quiet, is this gonna feel too other? He kept on saying this. He's like, I don't want it to feel too other. I want it to still feel like our show, because we are seeing footage of the big three, of the little big three, that we have never seen before. And in the past, we always scored through that. I always used to play. What did I used to play? I used to always go.
You know, I was thinking about asking you to do that, and I didn't think I was going to have the chutzpah to ask, and now you have it in your hand.
I used to always go. Hold on a sec. So every time we would see the little big three, it was like, every time we would see the little big three, it was always.
That's right. A little higher.
It was always that. It was this very sort of like bright thing. And it would always sort of cover up these scenes in this era. I always used to score through this stuff because it was always a device to sort of get us back into the present or something. So now we're seeing all this footage dry for the first time. And it almost started feeling a little haunting seeing it that way. Like we'd never seen it, like with no sound. It was just them living a day in their life. And that's what he wanted it to feel like, a day in their life. And that conversation was big because Dan, I remember the editor originally, our amazing editor, Julia, had put a song in to end the series. And they were thinking, at one point she had like a cover of Here Comes the Sun. And Dan was like, no. He's like, this has got to be Sid, or it's something emotionally calling us back to season one in some way. And so I was like, let it be me. Not to make a deal.
And that's loyalty.
Yeah, he's like, it's got to be one of the two. And then I thought of that theme, the Kevin Painting theme from 105. It was the 5th episode where Kevin is talking to Tess and Annie about how we're all connected through this painting. And it was one of my favorite moments in the series. And I'd never brought that theme back. And it was probably the most epic theme I'd ever written, but it never felt right. Every time there were moments I tried to insert it, it never felt right. And so this achieved what Dan wanted, where he wanted to end on such a hopeful, positive note. And I think that theme helped. But am I thinking about Randall? What am I thinking about in that moment? I tried to not overthink it too much because I wanted to make sure that we stuck the landing. And there's a big there's a lot of pressure on that. Like if I didn't if Dan and I didn't have that exchange about what that ending could be musically, I don't know what it would have ended up being. And the first time he heard it, he was done. He's like, this is it. And there was not a single note. I mean, it was just, we nailed it. Or we knew it. Second I turned it in, the editor called me or texted me, and it was like tear emojis and oh my God type of text. Like, this is it.
And how long does it take you to achieve that? Sitting in your studio, which people can see, you've got everything there. Is this a week? Is this a night? Is this a month? Is it a day?
It's a lot less time than anyone would ever want to work on this show. It's a network television show where we had to deliver weekly episodes. It's not like we had like a 10 episode season. These are 18 episode seasons. And just like the writers don't have much time, post doesn't have much time. I think I scored that final episode in probably 4 straight days.
That's astounding. And to me, and maybe I misheard the way you just told that story, your input with your friend going back decades is what allowed the show that is about the span of decades to have the ending that you and your friend from
Yeah.
college both wanted. I mean, there's something kind of musical about that, pun fully intended.
Yes. I don't know how to describe it, but I don't think that if he and I hadn't had the relationship that we have, would we have sort of come to that same conclusion or the same way to end it together.
But you're not
And
a
yet,
writer there. You're a writer. Like you're a writer. Like you're contributing to this is the tone. This is the scene. This is the way. I didn't even realize that. I assumed you're given a script and you're given dailies. And it's like, Sid, go make magic. And that does not sound to me like that text exchange.
yeah, no, that you may be right. I don't want to like give myself too much credit, but like I know that um, the one of the most empowering parts of working on the show is being able to like play a part in defining the tone. You know, you're right. Like to your point, like if there was some big orchestral piece of music to end that, it could have been just not cool. This felt poignant. It felt like it captured all the nostalgia of the show that we wanted to feel in those moments. And I remember like working on that final scene, and I'm not saying it's because of the music, it was just all of it. Like, that week I cried every time I opened up that scene to make an edit, to adjust something, to adjust a level, to tweak something that I wanted to tweak. I mean, it was like, and I knew at that point that it was going to connect. I mean, it was as if I'm, yeah, you know.
So it's amazing that you're saying that, because I would think you're jaundiced, and we're going to start to wind up in a minute, but I got like a couple of quick lightning round ones. Like, it
Yeah.
actually sounds like you're affected by your own show and your own music, because I'm sitting here going, does he think I'm nuts because I find the show beautiful? Before every commercial break, I'm like, I don't feel these emotions. I'm a 48-year-old criminal defense lawyer. I see the worst of I don't feel any of that. I'm watching the end of a show. I'm watching Kevin. I'm watching Jack. I'm watching a look, and so it sounds to me like you're actually feeling something. This is not just a job to you.
My litmus test for sending in any piece of music over scenes that are like pivotal to a show or an episode. I mean, episode 17, every one of those train scenes, same idea. I don't send in a music cue back to editors, to Dan, unless I feel a tingle in my spine. That's sort of the thing I'm chasing. It's a very cool experience, because it's all about the placement. It's the placement of the right note at the right time, in the right space, after a certain thing has been said. It's that feeling. And I don't score very sort of like tightly to picture, meaning like just because somebody looks at somebody, I don't have to hit that. It's not a cartoon. But I am scoring constantly to character and feeling and emotion. I'm always scoring to the larger emotion. And so I knew every single piece, and this is something I'll be so grateful for. Like, I never left anything on the table on the show. Like, every single piece of music I played, not to toot my own horn, but I played every single note of that score myself in the studio, with the exception of our beautiful cellist, Ginger. I don't play cellos, but every other sound, all the percussion was made on.
You're the prince of This Is Us.
Oh, stop. But
for people who get that.
But yes, that's good. I like it. But but for me, I really felt like that was the test. I had to feel a tingle in my spine before I sent it. And every time, and whenever I did that, Dan would feel it too. I knew.
Two last questions for you, because I know we have to wrap up. This is a very unusual show for me this week. Trust me, we're not my usual format. I won't even bore you with what the usual format is. Two last questions. One,
yes.
This is a show that I think should live on. It's on Netflix. This music shouldn't just be done with me. What is the interest, or how does it work to get more people to watch the pilot episode on Netflix? Because once you watch the pilot episode and you get to the end, I don't know how you stop watching the show for 6 seasons. Is that ever discussed with you and Dan? I'm not getting into royalties and residuals and all of that, but is that ever discussed that, look, I'm 48, I watch it. How do you get somebody who's 17 or 21 that doesn't have a lot of hope in their life and doesn't understand family and doesn't understand hard work? There aren't shortcuts, because the people in the show work, which is actually
Yeah.
refreshing in our society. Ever have a discussion about getting more people to watch it now that it's quote unquote over?
I've never had a discussion with Dan, but I think what we did sort of hit on in he and I, we spent a night like just getting some celebratory drinks, just he and I at his house, just the two of us, and it ended up being like us, like, toasting to like what we did,
I'm sure
and
it's a much bigger house than it was 20 years ago.
that's for sure. um, and uh, and the thing that we did land on was that, there's obviously, there always, the thing we never understood was that there were critics of the show who felt like, oh, it's it's too hopeful, too emotional. This is like, it's a lot of sort of like, there's like people who think that art cannot have emotionality, and art has to feel cold and
It has
distant.
to look like, it has to be the Batman, depressing and dark.
Right, it has to feel dark. It has to feel like, it needs to you can't feel too much. If you do too much, then no, it can't be that good.
Yeah.
But we proved over the last 5-6 episodes of series was that, man, this could be incredibly artful, and you can be emotional. I mean, that penultimate train episode, I texted Dan, I was like, how Lynchian is this? I felt like we were in an episode of Twin Peaks all of a sudden. I was just like, felt David Lynch-esque to me, the way this was going. And that was the genius of Dan, or is the genius of Dan, is that he's able to find the mystery, the drama, the comedy, just in everyday life, which is sort of why the ending is also poignant. It's haunting seeing that last look between a young Randall and his dad. That is a haunting, and all it is a look.
That's it.
All it is, and that's what Dan's brilliance is, that he could find magic in the space in between. There's magic.
And it's sort of like, there's a line that I think is being lost in the world, and it's sort of like, I've got your back. And that's how I saw Jack looking at Randall. I've got your back, but I also saw Randall looking back and going, I've got yours, even if we know in the show you're not going to be around. I've got the family's back. I'm here. I just thought it was so beautiful. Okay, we have about 60 seconds left. You got to go. We got to go. The show's 1 hour long. What is next for you? And do you worry that you don't have anything that will touch you like this again? Or is Fogelman cooking up something that's going to rock our world again? I don't have a clue. That's not a spoiler question. What's next, and how do people find you if they want to listen to more of you?
It's going to be different. There's never going to be anything like this. That's part of me and Dan's conversation at his house the other day. We're like, we knew, looking at each other, we're like, we're never going to ever do anything like this again. So and the good thing is that we're also not in our late 20s. We're in our mid 40s. We've had a career and worked through stuff and had lots of failures. And so that we appreciated every minute of this as it was happening, for sure. I know I did. I never took a minute for granted on the show. So we know we'll never do anything like this again. I will never work on a project where I can have this level, this sort of like meta experience, helping writing music for the writer of the show to help grieve the loss of his mother from a young age. I mean, those types of things will never happen again. So it'll always be different. And it's best to not try to chase that, and just accept it and appreciate it for what it was, which is just, it was a once in a generation show. He's a once in a generation writer. This was a once in a generation collaboration for me, for my family. And people, I do the music for Only Murders in the Building, and
Stephen Martin.
Yeah.
Not Steve Martin and Martin Short. I say Stephen Martin because I've seen their show. I just read his autobiography. What a team.
Another Fogelman production. He's a producer on that. And so Dan's going to cook up something else at some point, and it's going to be magic too. I think he's like, in this show, he really I feel like, as a friend, I can say, I feel like he found his voice, and so there's a confidence that he can take with this to the next thing. But I couldn't be prouder about the way we ended. We stuck that landing. Very hard to do. I love that you brought in the Sopranos comparison, because I think we feel that same way.
This has been an honor. And as anybody listening to this show on Sirius XM will know, that this, to me, you said once in a lifetime, this was a once in the history of this show joy for me, for personal reasons, not professional. My professional life is night and different. Siddhartha Khosla, thank you so much for being with us. This really was an honor. And it's 1 week after watching the finale, so it even sits more powerful for me. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ari. I really, really appreciate it.